The great sale room of Sterling's had never been this silent. 400 people in black ties sat frozen beneath the crystal chandeliers, paddles limp in their laps, and not one of them was breathing. On the podium, under a single museum spotlight, hung the painting the whole world had come to buy. A small, luminous panel of a girl reading by candlelight, said to be the lost masterpiece of a Dutch master dead 350 years. The auctioneer stood with his gavel raised and forgotten in the air. The bidding had reached $118 million, and it had just stopped. At the center of the room, beside the easel, stood Tristan Vandermeer in a tuxedo that fit like it had been sewn onto him, one hand still resting on the gilded frame as though the painting were already his family's triumph. His knuckles had gone white. The frame was trembling under his fingers. A few feet away, in a gray cotton dust coat still smudged with basement chalk, stood the woman he had spent all week calling the Crate Girl, the quiet cataloger he had ordered to fetch his coffee, carry his boxes, and stay out of sight. She was not shouting. She was not even angry. She simply lifted a small brass loop, the kind restorers wear on a cord around the neck, and said the words that would end Tristan Vandermeer's entire world. Stop the sale. Lot 47 is a forgery. And I'd know. I'm the person whose name was supposed to prove it wasn't. A phone lay face up on the specialist's table, its screen still glowing from the call that had just ended. The call that had turned the most important people in the room the color of ash. The chairman of the auction house would not meet anyone's eyes. The head of Old Master Paintings had gripped the back of a chair to stay standing. And Tristan Vandermeer, whose family name was carved into museum wings on 2 continents, who had spent the week treating this woman like something to be swept off the floor, finally understood exactly who he had been humiliating. To understand how a woman in a $10 dust coat stopped a $120 million sale in front of 400 witnesses, and why every powerful person in that room was suddenly terrified of her, we have to go back. Back a few days, to a freight elevator, a basement full of crates, and the first cruel thing Tristan Vandermeer said to the woman he thought was nobody. The basement of Sterling smelled of sawdust, cold stone, and old varnish, and Mira Solano loved 2 of those 3. She stood at a long work table under the hum of fluorescent tubes, 41 years old, small and unhurried, with ink on her fingers and reading glasses pushed up into dark hair going quietly gray at the temples. Around her rose the private machinery of a great auction house that the bidders upstairs never saw. Towers of custom crates, rolls of glassine and acid-free tissue, climate gauges ticking, and rack after rack of paintings waiting their turn in the light. She was logging condition notes on a stack of minor lots, a chipped frame here, a lifting flake there, in a small, precise hand, and every few minutes she would glance up at the freight elevator, memorize a face, and go back to her notes. She liked the basement. Down here, nobody performed. A painting was just a painting, and it either told the truth or it didn't. Because Mira Solano was not really a temp cataloger.
Her full title, printed on a card zipped into the lining of her bag, was Chair of the Authentication Committee of the de Groot Foundation and author of the Catalogue Raisonné of Cornelis de Groot, the definitive record, 30 years in the making, of every genuine surviving work by the Dutch master. In the small, ferociously particular world of old master paintings, no picture could be sold as a de Groot, insured as a de Groot, or hung in a museum as a de Groot without the word of her committee. Dealers had waited years for her verdicts. Collectors had gained and lost fortunes on a single line of her writing. And the woman who could make a canvas worth $100 million, or worth nothing but the wood it was painted on, was standing in the basement in a borrowed dust coat, pretending to be nobody. Paint doesn't lie, her old teacher used to say. Only people lie about paint. That teacher was the reason Mira was standing there at all. 30 years earlier, she had begun as a graduate assistant to Professor Beatrix Hald, the great and difficult scholar who had first reconstructed de Groot from a handful of scattered panels. Huld had taught Mira everything: how varnish yellows, how lead white ages, how a real brushstroke carries the hesitation of a living hand, and a copied one never quite does. An authentication is a promise, Huld had told her once, pressing a worn brass loop into her palm. It says a person who spent her whole life learning to see looked at this thing with honest eyes and swore it was true. Break that promise for money, and every real picture in the world is worth a little less, so you never break it. Not for anyone.
And Mira had learned the hardest way what happened when someone did break it. Late in her career, Beatrix Huld had been asked by a powerful dealer to authenticate a painting she knew in her bones was a fake. She refused. The dealer, who had already sold the picture to 3 buyers in a chain that would collapse the instant she said the word forgery, did not argue. He simply destroyed her. He funded a rival scholar to publish attacks on her methods. He whispered that she was senile, difficult, past it. He buried her in lawsuits she couldn't afford. By the time the truth came out, years later, Beatrix Huld had died in a rented room, discredited and nearly forgotten, and the fake still hung in a private collection, with a fortune's worth of paperwork swearing it was real. Standing at her teacher's small funeral, Mira had made a promise of her own, that she would build something money could not bend. She spent the next 2 decades doing exactly that. The catalog, the committee, a wall of scholarship so rigorous and so public that no dealer's checkbook could ever again decide what was true. That was why, at 41, she still put on a dust coat. It was why she was here.
Because 3 weeks earlier, a letter had arrived at the Foundation's quiet office, sent anonymously from an address that led nowhere, by someone frightened. Inside was a single photograph, the star lot of Sterling's upcoming Old Masters evening sale, a small panel of a girl reading by candlelight, cataloged as a newly rediscovered Cornelis de Groot, and estimated at $120 million. And Mira, who had spent 30 years with every real de Groot in the world, had looked at that photograph for 4 seconds before the back of her neck went cold. She could not yet have said why, but something in the fall of the light, the shadow under the girl's hand, was wrong. Wrong the way a note is wrong to a musician before she can name which one. Someone was about to sell a painting for the price of a small country under a name Mira had spent her life protecting. So she had done what she always did when the truth was buried somewhere a committee memo couldn't reach. Signed on quietly under her plain first name as temporary basement help, and gone to see the thing with her own eyes. Into that first gray morning, the young man who would define her week arrived the way he always did, in a wave of noise. The freight elevator doors opened, and Tristan Vandermeer strode out where he was not supposed to be, phone in hand, an assistant scurrying behind him. He was 28, glossy and impatient, the sole heir of the Vandermeer collection, the dynasty whose late patriarch had spent a lifetime buying masterpieces, and whose grandson now spent the fortune those masterpieces had become. Lot 47 was, the catalog said, from the celebrated Vandermeer collection, and Tristan wore that sentence like a crown. He looked around the basement for someone to use, and his eyes landed on the nearest person in a dust coat, Mira.
You. He held out an empty cup without looking at her. Flat white, extra shot, the place on Madison. Not the lobby swill. He glanced up, took in the gray coat, the ink-stained fingers, the reading glasses, and a slow, delighted smile spread across his face. The smile of a man who has found something to be amused by. God, look at you. Mira did not take the cup. I'm cataloging this morning, not fetching, she said mildly. The cafe's on the mezzanine, and the paintings aren't handled without a specialist present. House rule, for your family's sake as much as anyone's. Tristan lowered his phone an inch, as if seeing her for the first time, and his smile sharpened. Did the crate girl just tell me the rules? His assistant winced. Let me explain how this works, because clearly no one has.
That painting up there is going to pay for this entire building's bad quarter. My family made this auction house, so there are people who matter in this room, and there is the help. And you, sweetheart, are going to spend the rest of your little contract finding out which one you are." He set the empty cup down on her condition reports, white on top of her careful notes. Flat white, extra shot. Try to remember it. Mira looked at the cup sitting on her paperwork, and then at him, and did not move to pick it up. "I'll remember," she said. She held his gaze for one long second, long enough that something uncertain flickered behind his eyes, some small unease he didn't like, and then she simply went back to her notes. It was the way she wasn't afraid of him that made Tristan decide right there to hate her.
Across the basement, an older man in a leather handler's apron looked up from a half-built crate and quietly took the whole thing in. Walter Boyd was 63, a master art handler and framer who had worked at Sterling's for 38 years. His hands had cradled more masterpieces than most museum directors would ever touch. He built crates like cabinetry, could carry a panel down a spiral stair in the dark without waking it, and had trained half the handlers on the eastern seaboard. The young staff loved him. He kept a tin of peppermints in his apron and a level head in every emergency. He waited until Tristan had swept back into the elevator, then crossed to Mira's table and set one of the peppermints down beside her ruined notes. "Don't mind him," Walter said. "That one came out of the womb pointing at things. You eat yet? You've got the look of someone who forgets." "I'll eat," Mira said, which was what she always said. "You'll faint," Walter corrected, in the exact tone of a stern uncle, and nudged the peppermint an inch closer. "Long week ahead, not on an empty stomach." Mira smiled, a real one, the kind almost no one got to see. For all the money moving through the floors above, this man had been kinder to a stranger he thought was a broke temp in 10 seconds than most of the collectors she had spent her career advising had ever been to anyone. Walter did not know he was being kind to the one person who could decide the fate of his employer's biggest sale in a decade. That was exactly why it counted. She noticed him the way she noticed a well-made frame, a sound, honest thing in a structure she was beginning to suspect was rotten. She met the second good soul an hour later at the cataloging station. Grace Tan was a junior cataloger, barely a year out of school, entering lot numbers with the tight, careful precision of someone who could not afford a mistake. Mira knew that posture. Someone who sent most of her paycheck home, in Grace's case to a mother and a younger sister in Queens, and lay awake at night, terrified that one wrong word from the wrong person could end it. When a senior specialist barked at her across the room, and she flinched and knocked a tray of numbered tags clattering to the stone floor, going scarlet as a passing assistant sighed, Mira crouched and helped her gather them, unhurried. "First big evening sale?" she asked. "Is it that obvious?" Grace whispered. "You already did the hard part," Mira said, handing her a tag. "You showed up terrified and you're doing the work anyway. That's the whole job. The rest is just practice." She smiled. "I've cataloged in worse basements than this. You'll be fine." Grace laughed, surprised, grateful, and something in her shoulders dropped an inch. What Mira did not say, because she could not yet, was that she had a very good guess who had mailed that frightened photograph to the foundation from an address that led nowhere. She said nothing, but she filed away Grace's carefulness beside Walter's kindness, and had no idea yet how much both would matter before the week was out. Kindness, Beatrix Howell used to say, is the one quality that never appears in a condition report and decides everything anyway. She had no idea how hard the next few days were about to test all of it. If you want to understand how much power a 28-year-old can have when no one has ever told him no, you only had to watch Tristan Vandermeer move through Sterling's in the week before the sale.
Doors were held. Elevators waited. A senior specialist rearranged an entire viewing schedule because Tristan wanted the light in the private room changed at 4 o'clock. His grandfather had spent 40 years and a shipping fortune assembling one of the great private collections in America, and Tristan had inherited all of it. The paintings, the name, the seat at every table, and earned none of it. He had also,
though the sale room did not yet know it, inherited the debts. A fortune that looked bottomless from the outside and was, in truth, running dry, propped up by the promise of one enormous sale. He wore his certainty like his watch, expensive, always visible, and telling everyone a time that suited him. He believed the rules were a thing that happened to smaller people down in the basement among the crates. And from the moment he arrived, he made the people who worked there his entertainment. It started small, the way cruelty always does. On the first afternoon, Mira brought a stack of condition reports up to the specialist's floor and set them at the wrong end of a table. Tristan, holding court nearby, made her stand there holding the pile while he explained loudly, for the benefit of two dealers, that this is exactly the problem with seasonal staff. You can't teach someone in a month what my family has known for generations. He left the reports untouched and, as a joke, dropped a $5 bill on top of them. "For the coffee you never brought," he said. Mira, who could have ended his family's sale with a sentence, said only, "I'll leave these with the specialist," and set the money down on an empty chair on her way out. It cost her nothing to keep her voice level. It cost him more than he knew to be watched that closely by someone taking notes he couldn't see.
Then the painting itself became the stage, because here was the thing that truly drove Tristan that week. The sale had to be enormous. He had staked everything: the family's cash flow, his own standing, the story he told about himself, on Lot 47 breaking records. And so he swept through the house, demanding the picture be relit, rephotographed, recatalogued in grander language. The estimate pushed higher, the marketing louder. He wanted the room breathless. He did not once ask the only question that mattered, the question a basement full of quiet professionals was too frightened to raise out loud. Was the painting he was selling actually what the catalog said it was? One person had tried to ask it. Her name was Dr. Ellen Park, and she was the house's staff conservator. 50, precise, a scientist to the marrow. The person who put paintings under the microscope before they went under the hammer. Mira first saw her on the second day, in the conservation studio off the basement corridor, arguing quietly and hopelessly with the head of the department. "I'm telling you, the paint sample is wrong," Park was saying, keeping her voice down. "I need more time, and I need to send it out. You don't rush a $120 million attribution." "We don't have time," came the answer, smooth and final. "The sale is in 5 days. The provenance is impeccable, and the committee letter is being finalized. Write your report, Ellen, but write it carefully. This one is spoken for." Mira, logging crates in the corridor with her back turned, went very still. The committee letter is being finalized. She was the committee. No letter existed. No letter was being written. Someone, somewhere above her, was preparing to tell 400 bidders that the DeGroote Foundation had blessed a painting it had never even seen. She wrote nothing down where anyone could see, but a cold, patient anger settled into her chest and did not leave.
The man who had spoken to Dr. Park was Dr. Charles Price, the head of Old Master Paintings at Sterling's, the specialist whose name would appear beside Lot 47 in the catalog, whose reputation and whose considerable commission were riding on the sale going through. Price was everything Tristan was not: quiet, courteous, silver-haired, spoken of as one of the great eyes in the business. And that, Mira would come to understand, was exactly what made him more dangerous than any spoiled heir. Tristan broke things loudly. Price broke them in a lowered, reasonable voice, with a smile, and made you feel unreasonable for noticing. And the cruelty spread, the way it always does, to whoever was weakest. That someone was Walter. It happened on the viewing floor. Walter, 38 years, the steadiest pair of hands in the building, was moving Lot 47 itself onto its viewing easel, a task no one in the house trusted to anyone else, when Tristan decided the old man was moving too slowly for his liking. "Careful, careful, God, look at him shake," Tristan said, loud enough for the dealers browsing nearby, pulling out his phone to film.
This is the priceless family heirloom, and they've got Grandpa here handling it with his arthritis. Say something for the camera, old-timer. Nothing? Just gonna stand there like part of the furniture? He circled Walter with the phone, while the old man stood with the painting braced perfectly, safely in his hands. Too professional to risk the panel by reacting, too proud to answer, cheeks burning.
Mira crossed the floor before she had decided to. She stepped between the phone and the old man, not roughly, just decisively, and put her own steady hands under the frame beside Walter's. "I've got this side," she said quietly to him. "Let's set her down together." She gave Walter a way to finish the job with his dignity intact. Then she turned and looked, once, directly into Tristan's camera, with calm, unreadable eyes, until he lowered the phone, without quite knowing why. "You," Tristan said, and his voice had gone to ice. "I don't know what your problem is, crate girl, but I am going to enjoy watching you carry your little box out of this building." He lifted the phone again and photographed her face. "Smile. I'm sending this straight to Charles and to the chairman." Mira let him take the photo. She had a feeling it would be useful later. She was right. He was not finished. Cruelty, once rewarded, always spreads to whoever is bravest as well as whoever is weakest. And when Grace quietly brought Walter a cup of tea in the break room afterward and murmured that filming him wasn't right, one of Tristan's assistants overheard and reported it, and Tristan turned the full weight of his boredom on the girl. "Did the little cataloger just have an opinion?" he said, finding Grace at her station. "What's your name?" "No, don't bother. There's no point learning it. I'll simply mention to HR that seasonal staff are gossiping about clients. And by the end of the month, there won't be a you on the payroll of any house in this city. That's how it works, darling. I don't remember your name. I don't have to. That's the whole point of being me and the whole point of being you."
Grace's eyes filled, but she did not look away, and she did not apologize. Mira watched a frightened young woman hold her ground for an old man who could do nothing for her, and felt the last of her patience turn into something harder and more useful. Later, passing Grace at the cataloging table, she said quietly, so only the girl could hear, "You did the right thing. Whatever you already told the people who needed telling, you did right. Keep a record of what you see this week. Dates, names, exactly as it happens." Grace went very still and looked at her with something between fear and hope, and did not ask how she knew. "He did," she whispered. That evening, Mira watched the machine of it all lay itself out clean. Tristan had not merely insulted her. He had humiliated a loyal old handler, threatened a frightened young cataloger, and above them both, a respected specialist was quietly preparing to invoke a foundation letter that did not exist. Because a family that needed the money and a house that needed the commission had decided, together, that $120 million was worth not looking too closely. She was not raging. She was charting. And a woman who charts is far more dangerous than a woman who shouts.
Late that night, when the viewing floor was dark and the last staff had gone, Mira did two quiet things. First, she let herself into the dim viewing gallery where Lot 47 hung waiting, took the worn brass loop from the cord around her neck, Beatrix Hald's loop, and leaned in close to the little painting she had crossed an ocean of doubt to see. Under the loop, in the raking light of a single lamp, the girl reading by candlelight gave up her secrets one at a time. The crackler, the fine web of age cracks, was there, but it sat on top of the paint in places instead of running through it, the telltale sign of a surface aged on purpose. And in the shadow beneath the girl's reading hand, where every genuine degroot in Mira's catalog carried a detail known only to her committee, there was nothing at all. Second, from her bag, she took a small ultraviolet torch, cupped it close, and swept it across the surface.
Under the UV, the old varnish glowed a soft, even green, except in a dozen places, around the girl's face and the flame, where the paint sat dark and dead. Modern retouching. Recent work, hidden under a skin of tinted varnish. She photographed all of it. She did not yet know how far up the house the lie reached, but she had a feeling. And she was right. The sale was supposed to end the way every Vandermeer demand ended, with the experts nodding, the paperwork smoothing itself out, and the painting going under the hammer for a fortune. And for a day, it looked like it would. But Mira had spent 30 years learning to read a picture, and now, quietly, she began to read the people around it. And the story they told was uglier than any forgery.
It came together in pieces. A word overheard in the conservation studio. A shipping label on the back of Lot 47's travel crate that showed the panel had spent 8 months, not in a centuries-old collection, but in a private restorer studio in the suburbs, before resurfacing in the Vandermeer holdings. A Provenance file left on a light table that Mira read upside down in 4 seconds and knew was wrong, the way she'd known the photograph was wrong. A suspiciously convenient chain of ownership, a fake 19th century estate inventory, 2 letters in a period hand that used a turn of phrase no Dutchman of that century would have written. The painting had not been rediscovered. It had been manufactured. A skilled forgery, dressed in a fabricated history, aimed at the one number that could solve all of Tristan Vandermeer's problems at once. Because here was the thing the sale room did not know. The Vandermeer fortune was nearly gone. The great collection had been quietly bled for years, sold off in private, borrowed against, spent. And all that was left was the family name and the debts hiding behind it. Tristan needed one enormous sale to stay afloat, and a lost de Groot, blessed by Sterling's and the Foundation, would do it. He did not care whether the girl reading by candlelight had ever been touched by a 17th century hand. He cared that 400 people believed she had. He was not alone in the lie. Dr. Charles Price, the great eye, the silver-haired specialist, had staked his reputation and a 7-figure commission on the attribution. And when his own conservator brought him a problem, he did what men like Price always do. He made it disappear. The problem had a name, and it was Prussian blue. Mira learned it the way she learned everything that week, by being invisible. She was logging crates outside the conservation studio when she heard Dr. Ellen Park's voice, low and desperate, through the half-open door.
Charles, I ran it twice. There's Prussian blue in the shadow of the dress and in the dark behind the candle. Prussian blue. It wasn't synthesized until 1704. De Groot died in 1668. There is no honest way a pigment gets into an original painting 36 years after the artist is in the ground. This panel was painted or repainted top to bottom in the modern era. And Price's voice, smooth and cold and reasonable. The science says there is later restoration, Ellen, which every 300-year-old panel has. You will write it up as a localized retouching in a non-original area, and you will not use the word forgery in a document with this house's letterhead on it 4 days before the most important sale of my career. Or you will find that the market is a very small place, and that conservators who cry wolf don't work in it for long. Mira outside the door went very still. There it was, in a single sentence. A scientist who had found the truth, and a powerful man ordering her to bury it. It was Beatrix Hold and the dealer, 30 years later, wearing a better suit, who teaches whole ruin happening again in real time, 4 days before it would cost 400 people $120 million. Dr. Park did the brave thing. She refused to soften her report. She sent the paint sample to an outside lab for independent confirmation, on her own account, without permission. And within a day, the machine did what machines like it always do. It looked for someone to punish. Dr. Ellen Park was placed on administrative leave pending review for unauthorized external testing that risked a client's confidentiality,
a house euphemism for embarrassing a specialist and a donor. Her access badge was deactivated, her report was pulled from the file, and a more agreeable junior was assigned to write a clean, quiet condition note that mentioned only minor, non-original retouching, and nothing about a pigment that hadn't existed in DeGroat's lifetime.
And then they came for Walter. Because Walter Boyd had seen the crate come in from the restorer's studio, and Walter had questioned it, gently, the way an honest old craftsman does, asking why a freshly rediscovered old master had a courier tag from a suburban workshop instead of a provenance from a great house. And when Dr. Park was walked out, Walter had said, to the wrong person, that it wasn't right, that Ellen was the best set of eyes in the building, and you didn't put a picture up for 100 million with your own scientist locked out. Within the hour, Tristan had his pretext. A small old scratch on the back of an unrelated frame, damage that had been documented for years, was suddenly blamed on Walter. He was accused of careless handling that endangered the collection, his 38 years erased in a single meeting, escorted to the loading dock with a cardboard box, his final pay and his pension contributions frozen, pending investigation. That detail was not a small one. Walter Boyd was raising his grandson, his daughter gone 2 years now, on an art handler's wage and the promise of a pension he was 18 months from collecting. The same letter that fired him for endangering the collection reached out of that marble building and put a boy's whole future in doubt. So Tristan Vandermeer's need for a fortune had not merely humiliated an old man for the crime of moving slowly. It had thrown away the two people, a scientist and a craftsman, honest enough to say the painting was a lie, and cleared the last obstacle between a forgery and $120 million.
When Mira saw Walter carry his box to the loading dock, stopping to lay one hand flat on the doorframe of the shop he'd built his life in, the way you'd say goodbye to a friend, something in her that had stayed patient all week went very still and very cold. This was the line the whole week had been walking toward. Not a rude errand, not a mocking video. A scientist silenced, a craftsman thrown away, and a fake about to be crowned. She found him on a bench on the loading dock, box on his knees, staring at the gray street. 38 years, Walter said. Not bitter, just lost. I taught half the handlers in this city how to carry a panel, and they say I endangered the collection, so a boy in a good suit doesn't have to hear the word forgery. He looked at the box. My grandson's got a science fair next month. I promised I'd help him build his project. What do I tell him? That his grandpa's a thief now? Mira sat down beside him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Up in the building, the great painting waited in its light. Walter, she said finally, and her voice had changed. Something underneath it had gone very quiet and very hard. I need you to trust me for one day. Don't sign whatever they send you. Don't cash anything. Be here tomorrow evening in your good jacket and be ready to stand up when I come for you. Stand up for what, kid? They decided. People like them always win the sale. Not this sale, Mira said, and put her hand over his hand. One day. And after tomorrow, you'll never again have to ask a man like him for permission to matter.
Then Mira Solano walked to the quiet end of the dock, took the card out of the lining of her bag, and looked at it for a long moment. Chair, Authentication Committee, the DeGroat Foundation, and thought about a worn brass loop and a teacher who had died discredited for telling the truth, and a promise made at a small and nearly empty funeral. She took out her phone and dialed the one number she had been saving all week. Claire Nwosu had been Mira's deputy at the DeGroat Foundation for 15 years and did not rattle easily. When her phone rang the night before the sale and the screen said, "Mira," she sat up. "Tell me what you're looking at," Clara said. "A forgery about to sell for $120 million under our name," Mira said, and told her everything. The Prussian blue, the fabricated provenance, the courier tag from a suburban studio, the modern retouching under UV,
The missing detail in the shadow, the silenced conservator, the fired handler, and a specialist claiming a foundation letter that had never been written. When she finished, there was a short silence. "You could kill this tonight," Clara said. "One statement from the committee. The Foundation has issued no authentication for this work, and no serious bidder touches it. So tell me why you haven't." "Because a quiet statement is a bad night for them and a lesson for no one," Mira said. "I've watched this house bend honest people all week, Clara. The rot isn't one painting. It's a business that treats the truth as a thing you manage when it's inconvenient. If I send a memo, their lawyers bury it. The painting quietly withdraws for further study, and in 2 years it surfaces in a private sale with the same fake papers. I don't want it withdrawn. I want it exposed. So documented, so witnessed, that no checkbook on earth can ever make it real again."
"Then don't make the scene," Clara said, and Mira could hear the old scholar smiling. "Build the case. Move quietly." What followed over the next day was a masterclass in patience. Mira did not storm the specialist's floor or flash her card. Working the phone from the shadow of a crate, she did what 30 years of looking had taught her. She gathered the truth until it was too heavy for any fortune to lift. First, the science. Dr. Ellen Park, locked out but not silent, had kept everything. Her original report, her photographs, and crucially, a retained portion of the paint sample, and the name of the independent lab now running it. Through the Foundation, Mira had the analysis expedited and formally confirmed. Prussian blue and a trace of a modern synthetic white, both impossible in a panel finished in 1668. Present not as a spot of later restoration, but through the fabric of the image itself. A specialist could argue about an eye. No one could argue with a spectrometer.
Second, the picture's own body. Every genuine DeGroote in Mira's catalog carried a secret, something she and 2 trustees had documented over decades and never published. Beneath the paint, in the underdrawing, DeGroote had a habit as fixed as a signature. In the darkest shadow of every finished work, he sketched a tiny wren, a private joke, a maker's mark buried where no buyer would ever see it. It showed up only under infrared reflectography, which sees through paint to the drawing below. Every real DeGroote had the little bird. Mira arranged, through the Foundation's equipment and the flag of her own authority, to have Lot 47 imaged under infrared. And where the wren should have been, there was nothing. No wren. No underdrawing at all in the modern manner. Just a mechanical tracing. A forger can copy a surface he can see. He cannot copy a bird he doesn't know is there. Mira was, quite literally, the only person alive who could prove that panel was a lie, and the only one with the authority to say what a true DeGroote would have shown. Third, the paper. Quietly and lawfully, the fabricated provenance was preserved beside the genuine records, the forged estate inventory, the 2 anachronistic letters, and the courier documents showing 8 months in a suburban restorer's studio. And most damning, Dr. Price's own messages, which a House Council, once the Foundation made clear what was coming, was compelled to preserve. Get it sold before the committee weighs in. The science can wait. Nobody retests a picture once it's hanging in a golf museum. Reclassify Ellen's finding as restoration and lock the file. Fraud in writing with a name on it.
But building a case in daylight is one thing. Staying invisible while a great house wakes up around you is another. And here the day turned genuinely tense. Because Marcus Thorne, the chairman of Sterling's, had not run the house for 20 years by being slow. The instant a conservator went to an outside lab and a temp started making calls from quiet corners, his instincts fired. Pull her file. For an hour, the walls tightened. An assistant was sent to bring the temp cataloger to HR. If anyone made one call to the right desk and learned that the seasonal help holding a $120 million sale in her ink-stained hands was the chair of the DeGroote committee herself, the house would lawyer up, freeze every file, and turn it into a 2-year paper war.
and the forged Provenance, the buried report, the infrared scan might vanish into a shredder before anyone could seal them. Mira called Clara. "They're looking for me," she said. "If they learn who I am before the records are secured, everything walks." "Then we let them find exactly what we wish them to find," Clara said. It was almost too easy. Mira Solano, the great authority on DeGroot, was famously camera-shy, a scholar who had spent 30 years letting her catalog speak and refusing to be photographed. There was no face to match to a name. The Foundation confirmed to Sterling's HR only that the temp was seasonal cataloging support, cleared and credentialed. True, dull, impenetrable. While the outside lab finished the analysis and counsel sealed the files. Thorne, reassured that the troublesome temp was just some overqualified art history graduate padding a resume, called off the search and turned back to the more important business of getting his star lot to the block. It was the last mistake he would make before the sale.
Tristan, meanwhile, made a mistake of his own. He tried to buy a witness. He had noticed the junior cataloger, the one with the opinion, writing in a little notebook, and it made him uneasy in a way he could not name. So he had an assistant find Grace Tan in the corridor and offer her an envelope, 2 months' pay in cash, more, to sign a short statement saying the fired handler had been careless and dishonest, and that Mr. Vandermeer had at all times conducted himself with grace. For one long moment, Grace thought about her mother, her sister, the rent, everything she had to lose. And then she thought about a quiet woman in a dust coat who told her that people who write things down are harder to erase. "No," she said. Her voice shook, but she said it. "You want the difference between me and him? I brought Walter a cup of tea when nobody important was watching. You're offering me money now." She pushed the envelope back. "I'm not for sale." And I kept my notebook. She walked away on legs that barely held her and went straight to the woman in the dust coat and pressed into her hands a notebook of dates and names in careful handwriting, and, folded inside it, a printout she'd been too frightened to act on. An internal email, weeks old, in which Price instructed a junior to proceed as if committee approval is in hand. Mira took it the way another woman would take gold. "This," she said quietly, "is worth more than the painting." That was the house's fatal error. They had not merely forged a picture and crushed 2 honest people. They had now tried to buy a false statement from a witness brave enough to refuse and honest enough to report it. The case had grown its sharpest edge, and they had handed it over themselves. The emotional low point came the next evening, in the hour before the sale. Walter Boyd, back on the loading dock, in his good jacket, as promised, but no longer believing, called his grandson to say he might not manage the science fair supplies after all. Mira caught only the end of it. No, buddy, it's not your fault. Your grandpa's just between things right now." And then sat with the dead phone in his lap, and for the first time, stopped believing it would come right. And Dr. Ellen Park, badge deactivated, found Mira at the dock. "I did the right thing, and I'm the one going home," she said, "while they hang my forgery on a wall and call it a masterpiece." Mira stood between the two of them, the locked-out scientist and the discarded craftsman, and made herself say the hardest sentence in the whole plan. "1 more hour," she told them both. "Give me 1 hour, and then I promise you will never again have to wonder whether the truth was worth telling." Meanwhile, on the surface, nothing had changed, which is what made the noose so tight. The clean condition note was in the file. The provenance hung together on paper. The forged certificate of the painting's history sat in the catalog for 400 bidders to admire. And Tristan, in his tuxedo, was already rehearsing his victory, filming himself beside the easel for the followers who did not know his family was 1 sale away from ruin. "Some of us," he murmured to the camera, "just have an eye for greatness." He caught the temp's face across the room as he filmed, and smiled, and mouthed, "You lose."
You keep saying it's your painting, Mira said quietly, to no one, watching him past a stack of crates. Say it a little louder in a minute.
With the sale room filling, an unexpected ally walked back through the staff door. Dr. Ellen Park, no longer in her lab coat, carrying a slim case. That's my original report, my photographs, the outside lab's confirmation, and the retained sample, she said, setting it in Mira's hands. Every word Price told me to erase. She straightened. Mira looked at Park's case, and Grace's notebook, and the infrared scan with its missing bird, and the lab report no eye could argue with, and knew the case was whole. There was one last piece. Clara called her back. "It's done," she said. "The committee is on standby, and an examiner from the art fraud unit is in the room tonight, seated as a bidder. Given a forged painting, a fabricated provenance, a suppressed scientific finding, falsified authentication claims, and an attempt to buy a witness, we have every ground to state publicly that the Foundation authenticates nothing here, and to refer the whole matter for prosecution. You've earned the right to close this yourself, Mira." And Mira, her voice warmed. Beatrix would be proud of the woman in the dust coat. Mira slid the phone into her pocket, felt the worn brass loop on its cord against her chest, and looked out at the bright sale room, the arriving bidders, the forged provenance glowing in 400 open catalogs, and a young man in a tuxedo filming his own victory. In a few minutes, the whole room was going to learn who the crate girl really was.
The great sale room of Sterling's blazed with light. 400 bidders filled the rows. A bank of telephone clerks lined one wall, receivers ready for the buyers too grand to attend. And on the podium, under a single museum spotlight, hung Lot 47, the girl reading by candlelight, with a gilded frame and a gilded lie. In the front row sat Tristan Vandermeer, and beside him, arrived to watch his triumph, sat Marcus Thorne, chairman of the House. Dr. Charles Price stood at the specialists' table, smiling his silver smile. And at the back, in a gray dust coat, stood Mira Solano. The auctioneer worked up through the minor lots and arrived at last at the star. "Lot 47, he said, and the room leaned in. "The rediscovered masterpiece by Cornelius de Groot from the celebrated Vandermeer collection. We open the bidding at $60 million. The paddles rose. 60, 70, 90. The telephone clerks murmured into their receivers. 100 million. 110. The auctioneer's voice built like a wave. $118 million to a bidder on the phone. And a voice from the back of the room said, clearly, without heat, "Stop the sale." The auctioneer faltered, gavel raised, heads turned. A murmur ran through the rows. Tristan spun in his seat, and his face went from confusion to fury as he saw who had spoken. "That's the temp," he said, loud enough to carry. "Security, get her out! She's basement staff. She has no business." "Lot 47 is a forgery," Mira said, walking down the center aisle, unhurried. "And I'd know. I'm the person whose name was supposed to prove it wasn't." And at that moment, two things happened at once. A woman rose from the bidders, the examiner from the art fraud unit, quietly showing her credentials to the auctioneer. And Mira's phone, set down on the specialist's table, lit up and connected on speaker, loud in the sudden hush.
A voice came from it, clear across the whole room. "This is the de Groot Foundation, Authentication Committee in session. Let the record show the Foundation has issued no authentication for the work offered tonight as Lot 47, and on the evidence before us, formally declines to do so. It may not be sold as a work by Cornelius de Groot." Marcus Thorne's hand froze halfway to his program. And the woman in the dust coat reached into the lining of her bag, drew out a worn card, and held it up so the spotlight caught the lettering. "Confirmed," Mira said into the phone, not loudly, because she did not need to. Dr. Mira Solano, chair of the Authentication Committee and author of the Catalogue Raisonné of Cornelis de Groot. I'm here. This painting is not a de Groot, and I will not let it be sold as one. And the whole room turned the color of ash. Dr. Price gripped the back of a chair. The auctioneer set his gavel down as if it had grown hot, and Tristan Vandermeer stood frozen at the front, phone still filming his own face as the pieces slammed together in his mind. Great girl, fetch my coffee, the help. You'll find out which one you are. I'm sending your photo to the chairman. Every contemptuous word he had said that week, he had said to the one woman who could turn his family's salvation into worthless painted wood. Mira reached the podium and turned to the room, and here she did the thing that made it undeniable. Not with a screen, not with a slideshow, but with the painting itself and the plain evidence of everyone's own eyes.
"You don't have to take my word for any of this," she said. From her coat, she took the small ultraviolet lamp, reached up and swept its light slowly across the surface of Lot 47, right there on the podium. Under the UV, in front of 400 people, the painting gave up its secret. The old varnish glowed a soft green, and across the girl's face, around the candle flame, a dozen patches sat dark and dead, modern retouching no 300-year-old panel should carry, laid on within the year. A gasp moved through the room like wind through a field. They could see it. Every one of them could see it. "That's not age," Mira said. "That's fresh paint, hidden under tinted varnish. Now here's what's underneath." She held up a single large photograph, the infrared scan, and walked it along the front rows so they could see it with their own eyes. No screen between them and the truth. This is the same panel, imaged through the paint to the drawing below. In every genuine de Groot, all of them, documented in my catalog over 30 years, the master hid a tiny bird, a wren, sketched in the deepest shadow, a private mark. It is in every real one. It is the one thing a forger can't copy because he doesn't know to look for it. She let the photograph rest in the hands of a stunned collector in the front row. There's no wren. There's no underdrawing at all, just a traced outline. Whoever made this copied a surface. They couldn't copy a signature they never knew was there. Dr. Price found his voice. This is absurd. The retouching is documented restoration. The attribution has been... Then let's talk about the paint, Mira said. And Dr. Ellen Park stepped out from the side of the room, case in hand, pale and steady. Dr. Park is the conservator this house locked out for finding this. Ellen?
Park set her report on the specialist's table, and beside it, connected a call on speaker to the independent laboratory. A scientist's voice filled the room. "Confirmed independently this afternoon. The sample contains Prussian blue and a modern synthetic white, present through the paint layers, not as surface restoration. Prussian blue was first synthesized in 1704. Cornelis de Groot died in 1668. This paint was applied in the modern era." Park laid the physical report and the sealed sample vial on the table for anyone to examine. "I ran it twice," she said. "I was suspended for sending it out." Then the examiner from the art fraud unit stepped forward and, one by one, laid the documents out flat on the specialist's table. No projector, just paper under the sale room lights, passed hand to hand. The forged estate inventory, the 2 letters in their too modern hand, the courier tag showing 8 months in a suburban studio, and Grace Tan, chin level, stepped from the staff door and set her notebook beside them, open to the page, and the printed email in Price's own words. "Proceed as if committee approval is in hand." "I kept a record," Grace said. "Dates and names. And they offered me money last night to lie about the man they fired. I said no." The room read it all in silence. Real paper, real handwriting, passed from one trembling hand to the next. And somewhere in the crowd a voice said, very quietly, "We were about to pay $120 million for this." And here Marcus Thorne rose. But he did not do what a lesser man would have done. He did not offer money, and he did not beg. He drew himself up
and reached instead for the only weapon a chairman has: fear.
"That is enough," Thorne said, his voice like a closing door. "This is an internal matter, and it will be handled privately. Miss Dr. Solano, whatever your credentials, you have interfered with a lawful sale in my house. I employ the finest attorneys in this city, and I promise you and anyone who repeats a word of this that you will spend the next decade in litigation." He turned to the room, to the phones already filming. "There is nothing to see here." Mira looked at him for a long moment, almost with pity. "You can't sue the truth quiet, Mr. Thorne," she said. "The committee is on that phone. An examiner from the fraud unit is standing in your sale room. The lab report is on your own specialist's table. The infrared scan is in that gentleman's hands. You can threaten me with 10 years of lawyers, but you cannot unsee a pigment that was invented 40 years after the painter died, and neither can anyone in this room." She let the silence stretch. "You built a house on trust. That's the only thing you actually sell. Not paintings. Trust. And you were about to sell all of it for one night's commission." Then she looked last at Tristan. "And the man who set all of this running," Mira said, "spent the week treating the people who keep this house standing like something stuck to his shoe, and then demanded a forgery be crowned a masterpiece because his family needed the money and a real painting wouldn't come when he called. Everything ugly that happened this week, the buried science, the two good people thrown away, happened to clear the way for that one sale." She did not need a screen for this either. The room had watched him all week. A painting isn't real because a rich man wants it to be, or because the estimate has 8 zeros. It's real when the one person qualified to say so puts her name to it. Tonight, on this canvas, that name would have to be mine, and I will not sign a lie."
Tristan's composure cracked all at once. "Undress me!" he shouted, wheeling around. He looked at the guards along the wall. Not one of them moved. He looked at the auctioneer who had stepped back from the podium and taken off his glasses. He looked at the telephone clerks who had quietly set down their receivers. "I screamed at the room that had bowed to his family all week!" And one by one, quietly, they refused. A guard folded his arms. A young clerk looked at the floor. Grace did not move. Dr. Park did not move. And then, cornered, Tristan Vandermeer did the thing that would follow him longer than any lawsuit. He turned on his own. "This wasn't me," he said, his voice climbing, pointing at Price. "It was him. Charles handled the attribution. My grandfather's people arranged the provenance. I only signed what they put in front of me. I didn't paint it. Ask him." He grabbed for the folder of documents on the table, and the examiner simply put a hand flat on it, and Tristan's fingers closed on nothing. He looked around one last time for a single face that would stand with him. His own name carved into museum wings, the house his family made, 400 people who had come to celebrate him, and found the chairman already turned half away, murmuring to a lawyer, calculating his own survival. And in that silence, in his beautiful suit, Tristan Vandermeer understood something that would outlast every headline. He had spent his whole life surrounded by people, and not one of them would cross the room for him now, because he had never once crossed it for anyone else. Slowly, he sat down, not in his front row seat, but on the edge of the podium step, beside the painting that was about to ruin him. And he had absolutely nothing to say. Mira looked at him, and her voice, when it came, was quieter now, almost gentle.
You kept asking me all week which one I was, someone who mattered or the help, she said. That was never the question. A painting doesn't become a masterpiece because the man selling it shouts the loudest. It becomes real when someone who has spent her whole life learning to see tells the truth about who made it, and is willing to say so when it costs everything.
She set the little UV lamp down on the table. "And for what it's worth, none of this had to be your ruin. If you let the old man keep his job, or listened to your own scientist, or been decent to the girl who brought you coffee, you'd have withdrawn a doubtful picture quietly and lived to sell a real one. You were handed one of the great collections on Earth." But Mira was not finished, because a good ending is never only about who falls. It is about who finally gets to rise. She walked up the aisle and out to the loading dock, to the bench where Walter Boyd sat in his good jacket, exactly as he'd been asked, not quite believing. "Walter," she said, "I'm sorry it took so long. I couldn't tell you who I was until the work was done." She smiled. "Now, about that science fair." She raised her voice for the staff drifting out behind her. "This man gave 38 years to this house and was thrown away for telling the truth. He handled more masterpieces than the men who fired him will ever own, and he questioned a forgery when the specialists wouldn't. His name is cleared tonight, his pension restored and backdated, and if he'll have it, there's a place for him teaching handling and framing at the foundation, where people who love paintings look after them honestly." The old man pressed her hand between both of his and could not speak at all.
"You taught half the handlers in this city to carry a panel like it was breathing," Mira said gently. "You spent your life keeping other people's treasures safe for a wage that never once got you near a room like that one. Tonight, you were the most important man in this building, and the only one who understood it was a girl who brought you tea. That's the lesson." Then she found Dr. Park and Grace beside her. "You were both punished today for doing exactly the right thing when it was expensive," Mira said, loud enough for the committee still on the line to hear. "That ends tonight. Dr. Park's suspension is void. Her report goes into the record as precisely what it was, the reason 400 people didn't buy a fraud. And any institution in the world would be lucky to have her eyes and her spine." She turned to Grace. "And you are not going back to a house that lets people be bought and sold. The foundation trains young researchers, the people who look at paintings with honest eyes so strangers aren't cheated. It can't be taught to anyone who can be bought. I watched you refuse an envelope last night that would have solved every problem you have. That is the whole job, and you already have it in you. There's a place with your name on it if you want it." Grace pressed both hands over her mouth. "And one more thing," Mira said, and took the worn brass loop from the cord around her neck and held it up so it caught the sale room lights. "There's going to be an award, the Hold Award, in the name of a great scholar who was destroyed for refusing to authenticate a fake, and who died discredited for telling a truth that turned out years too late to be right. It goes every year to the person, handler, scientist, cataloger, any of them, who protects the truth about a work of art when it would be so much easier and so much more profitable to stay quiet. Walter, Ellen, Grace, you're on the first list. You're the reason I still remember what the whole job is for." The room, which had held its breath, finally let it go. Staff were grinning. A bidder began to applaud, and then the whole sale room joined in. At the edge of it, quietly, the examiner from the fraud unit was speaking with Dr. Price, who was no longer smiling at all, and with Marcus Thorne, whose threats had curdled into the careful voice of a man trying to save an institution. Tristan was helped up from the podium step by a single embarrassed cousin, no longer the heir to an empire, just a young man who had never been told no, and had now been told it by an entire room at once. Late that night, when the bidders had gone and the great chandeliers were dimmed, and Lot 47 sat crated and impounded in the basement she had come to love, Mira Solano walked the length of the empty sale room alone, checking that the minor lots were properly covered, out of pure habit, the way you'd settle a room that had been frightened. She didn't do it because anyone was watching. She did it because that, in the end, was the whole point.
In the weeks that followed, though the world would only ever share that one glittering night in the sale room, everything rolled out just as Mira had promised. The independent review of Sterling's found what such reviews always find once someone honest is allowed to look.
rushed attributions, buried reports, a culture that treated the truth as a thing to be managed when a big enough sale was on the line. Lot 47 was withdrawn, impounded, and became the opening exhibit in a fraud case that reached Price, the Vandermeer Provenance, and the forger's suburban studio. Dr. Ellen Park was reinstated with an apology and soon left to run conservation for a great museum that valued her spine. Grace Tan became the youngest researcher the Foundation had ever trained, and still, on the first look at every painting, checked for kindness in a room before she checked for crackler. Walter Boyd got his pension, his name back, and a grandson who won his science fair with the best-built display in the gym. And the Vandermeer name, which had counted on one forged painting to hide a fortune already gone, discovered that the market it had ruled for a century has a very long memory and no patience at all for a family that sold a lie. Tristan Vandermeer had a famous name, a front row seat, and a grandfather's collection. Walter Boyd had a cardboard box, a frozen pension, and 38 years of treating other people's treasures and other people like they mattered. Only one of them still had his dignity when the lights went down.
So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. Was Mira right to sign on quietly and let the whole ugly week play out, the buried report, the fired handler, the forged papers, before she revealed who she was? Or should she have killed the sale with one phone call the day that photograph landed on her desk? Tell me below. And be honest about this one too. We have all, at least once, looked straight through the person carrying our boxes, or pouring our coffee, or cleaning our floor, and quietly decided they didn't count. If you believe the most expensive thing in that room was never the painting, that it was the truth, and that the truth is the one thing no fortune can actually buy, then subscribe and stay for the next one. Because next time, we're walking into a Paris couture house on the eve of its biggest show in 50 years, where the label's arrogant young heir humiliates the silent old seamstress hemming gowns in the basement atelier, never once imagining that the hired help with the thimble and the thread is the legendary designer whose name is stitched into the label itself, and whose signature is the only reason the house is worth anything at all. You won't believe how that one ends.